go ahead and begin. Um, Thank you for joining us for this proposal meeting for a Yale Interdisciplinary Reparations Commission. My name is Christopher Fields. I'm a postdoc in the Division of Molecular Psychiatry at the School of Medicine. I invited faculty from various schools and departments across Yale to help us think through the creation of this commission, the importance of it, and what function it should serve. This call is being recorded for the benefit of faculty and invitees who are unable to attend. And for those of you who shared, you will need to leave early in the call. First, you will hear from our guests, invited reparations advocates, who will share some background on the restorative justice claim for Black Americans of US chattel slavery descent, and who will also share some guidance for this commission. And in the final 15 or 20 minutes, we will have an open discussion open to everyone on the call. In the interest of time, please reserve your questions and the discussion for the end of the call. I would like to share that the Division of Molecular Psychiatry is currently hosting a monthly reparations speaker series this fall. If you're interested in attending, please register for these talks using the registration link provided in my October 7th email. As was shared in our September reparations series talk by Texas A&M University sociologist Joe Fagan, we are inviting other departments to continue this reparations series into 2021. And this may, in fact, be the function of a reparations ad hoc committee that forms here at Yale. Excellent invitees may be Cornell West, Yale alum Henry Louis Gates Jr., and Nicole Hannah-Jones, among other experts on various aspects of the subject of reparations. In addition to continuing this series, as will be discussed today, the core function of this commission should be to advance scholarship that successfully lobbies and provides a framework for a data and history-driven plan for federal reparations, as opposed to an internal focus on Yale's possible involvement with the slave trade. As was discussed in his Roosevelt Institute report, our November speaker, Dr. William Darity, will likely discuss why piecemeal efforts at financial reparations from private institutions and donors, such as JP Morgan Chase's $30 billion pledge, are insufficient to rectify the damage of systemic racism produced by slavery, Jim Crow, and contemporary discrimination. Also in my October 7th email, I shared a video from past presidential candidate Tom Steyer urging Yale to take a central role in leading the national conversation on reparations. Tom is not the only alumnus strongly advocating for reparations, as Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who is currently leading the passage of Federal Reparations Bill HR 40, is also a Yale alum. I'd like to share Steyer's video to contextualize our conversation here today.
Society. I'd like to point out at the very outset that the person leading the charge in the Congress of the United States, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, is also, like me, a proud Eli. I think it's important to note also at the outset that there is a chance for Yale University to help lead a national conversation on the history of what's gone on in the treatment of African Americans, to discuss what's happened and what we can do and how best to repair the damage. What we're talking about is creating a series of talks, an interdisciplinary series of talks, leading to a Yale commission to study reparations. And let me say that there are other leading universities who are on this path, who are intent on being part of this national conversation. But I think that Yale especially can be a leading voice here in terms of this scholarly work, coming up with solutions to the damage that has been done over 400 years. Let's be clear, we're in a Black Lives Matter moment, confronting as a society systemic racism. But this is nothing new. It's absolutely necessary in this conversation to go back to the codification of slavery into our founding documents, into our history through Jim Crow, right up to the present systemic racism that permeates today's America. That is the kind of study that is 400 years in the making It is absolutely appropriate for the leading institutions to go into the causes of what has happened, the history of what has happened, and to study how best to repair what's happened. Let's remember that enslaving Africans was the basis for American prosperity in the first place, and that this is an equity conversation at its heart. What is due and how best to deliver a repairing of the debt owed to the descendants of enslaved Africans. And let me say this, my experience of working on environmental issues, on climate issues over many years, has always been centered on environmental justice, started in the Black and brown communities across this country, where our society has always centered our air pollution, our water pollution, and our toxins. And my personal experience is, if you start with leadership from those communities, if you actually deal with the personal, immediate, racial injustices of our society, you will come up with the right environmental policies. You will come up with the right climate policies to address a global problem. And I think it is incumbent on Yale University, if you want to be a leading university, then you've got to be telling the truth about the most important issues and stepping up when others are scared to. So I encourage everyone to realize that the time is now for us to address a deep systemic issue at the heart of America for 400 years, that if we don't look back and tell the truth, if we don't work to come to solutions together, we can't move forward together, and that this is not a Black problem. This is not an African American problem. This is an American problem for everyone here, for everyone to confront, and for everyone to solve together.
So we have with us the directors for Tom Steyer's Diversity and Social Inclusion team, Jeremiah Chapman and Jamia Adams, to share some encouragement on behalf of Tom for Yale to take a leading role in reparations scholarship.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am Jamia Adams, Chief of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and the Racial Justice Lead for the Tom Steyer PAC. As you all saw from Tom's video, he is firmly rooted in his support of reparations as a reparative measure for the enslavement of Africans and its codification into the laws of our country. Tom understands it from both an economic standpoint and the truth and reconciliation strategy. During his campaign, Tom said that most non-Black Americans didn't know this history and that it was critical that we spoke about this issue among all Americans. We're a few weeks out of the November 3rd election, and Tom is committed to working to push our current president out of office and elect a leader who will listen to his constituencies. That's why he's not able to participate today on this live call. But his commitment to Joe Biden's campaign is as a full-time surrogate. So I just wanted to let everyone here know. Reparations is an issue that I have personally been committed to since I learned about the enslavement of my ancestors. It is not only my work, it is my commitment to an aggrieved wrong that must be addressed. We're in a racial justice reckoning moment, and activists and organizers who have been working on the issue of reparations for years, academics like yourselves, have put together the data and stories that belie a need for reparations, a need that will elevate our entire country to the next phase of its development, of a more equitable and just society. We know that environmental justice, healthcare disparities, housing discrimination, and criminal justice are all tied to the root of the enslavement of Africans and the narrative that came with it of painting those people as less than or inferior. We are committed to changing that narrative, and we can only do that with serious dialogue, study, and legislation. You have my commitment and that of Tom Steyer's that this work will continue. Now I'd like to pass the mic to my brother and colleague, Jeremiah Chapman, our Social Impact Director.
All right. I don't want to be too duplicative of what Jamia said. I think she quite perfectly, but a great deal of my work has been centered around creating messaging and op-eds and content around the issue of reparations, as well as coordinating with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's office. There are currently 157 sponsors or co-sponsors for the HR 40 bill that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is currently advocating for. So I would just, applaud you all to continue your efforts and to formalize this commission, as I think it could be something that is certainly beneficial to the work and to really narrowing down, what reparations looks like monetarily. There are various conversations around the economic figures for that, as well as the systemic changes that would happen if reparations were to take place. And so I believe that Yale can be certainly a beacon of light and an institution that can offer its research research capabilities and certainly the energy that we've seen from the students, the postdocs, and the like. I think it's incredibly important that we continue that effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeremiah and Jamia. Next, we have Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, co-founders of the reparations advocacy group American Descendants of Slavery, or ADOS, to share some background on the reparations claim for Black Americans of U.S. chattel slavery descent. ADOS was primarily responsible for initiating renewed popular support for Black American reparations, and their sustained engagement with this issue made it a political platform during the 2019 Democratic primary debates. First, Mr. Moore asked us to share this 90-second video contextualizing the racial wealth gap.
Tone Talks presents the reality behind the racial wealth gap. In America, we understand race as a literal foot race, where whites just got a lead based on effort, when in actuality, due to several hundred years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, Black people were more like the shoes whites wore down to run forward economically. The recent data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances tells a story that even though the media shows us young Black millionaires like Steph Curry and LeBron James, without the family car, the middle Black family is worth just over $4,000, while the middle white family is worth over $140,000 using the same accounting. In fact, according to the Federal Reserve data, the middle or 50th percentile Black family is equivalent in wealth to the 20th percentile white family. In terms of wealth, Black middle is the equivalent of white poor. The upper echelon of wealth tells us much the same story, showing that white America makes up nearly all of our nation's top 1%, with only 380,000 Black families having a net worth more than even $1 million. All while, according to the new data, 15% of white families are worth more than $1 million, and over 1 million white American families are worth more than $10 million. The racial wealth difference isn't just a gap, it's a seismic hole that's only growing and needs policy immediately to fix it. Subscribe to learn more at tonetalks.org.
So Yvette Carnell is founder of the weekly political show Breaking Brown and the originator of the ADOS hashtag. She is a writer of politics, race, and wealth, and has been featured in The Guardian, Politico, NPR, and other national news outlets. Ms. Carnell?
Well, I think they're going to show a couple of images here while I'm talking, hopefully. But what I wanted to say was basically the thing that everyone needs to understand as we move forward in terms of reparations. And it shouldn't even be something that would cause a degree of controversy in terms of who we are. We have to anchor lineage. And when I mean that, I mean, when we say American descendants of slavery, we're talking about slavery as the institution. And when you come from that, and we're talking about the accrued disadvantage, so slavery all the way to now, right? Everything, Jim Crow, Black codes, all of that. Now, when you talk about that, everybody needs to be clear. We have to be very, very clear that we're talking about a very specific group that is anchored in a very specific kind of way, right? So we are ADOS. Doesn't mean we're excluding anybody, doesn't mean we're xenophobic or anything like that, but we're ADOS. You have the majority of African immigrants came post 1990. You have Caribbeans who came earlier because of their proximity to us. But ADOS come from chattel slavery in this country. And there is a specific burden that comes from that. And there is a specific cost that we bear from that. And we have to be very careful and very specific to understand that this is not just about the browning of America. You know, we have a lot of tech CEOs who are brown, but they're not ADOS. And just like the Kerner report said, we have been tethered to the bottom as a very specific group of people. And I think the key to reparations is that specificity in terms of understanding who bears that very specific cost, who inherited the cost of slavery and who did not. You know, we have a lot of Black people and people, Africans and so forth, who are not necessarily, right? Who are not necessarily ADOS, and they're not. And so we have to, if we don't understand the cost and who pays the cost and who bears the cost, then I don't know how we ever get to a space where we can do and we can have fundamental reparations, because that anchoring of lineage isn't race. Lineage is lineage. Lineage is what we come from and what we came through. And if you don't understand what we come from and what we came through, then there's no way to really understand what that cost is and who has bared the cost and who should get the debt, right? A debt is owed ADOS. A debt isn't owed all Black and brown people. There's a Black agenda for that, right? But that is not reparations. So I think the first thing we have to understand who came here, when they came here, and how they came here to understand that debt. A lot of groups came after that. And what happened is, after the Civil Rights Movement, they walked into the benefits of the fight that had been fought. And a lot of people, Stokely Carmichael and others, walked into that fight and fought with us, even though they were not ADOS. But we were the ones who paved the way for that, and we still bear the cost. And so we have become what we call ourselves, a bottom caste in this country because of that. That is the consequence of that. So that's the starting point. Without that, you don't have anything else.
So Chris, did you want me to go next?
Go ahead, Antonio.
My name is Antonio Moore. I'm an attorney here in Los Angeles. I was nominated on an Emmy called Cracking the System on the Iran-Contra, and I co-founded ADOS. I think that for simplicity's sake, and I think it does it a bit of injustice, but for simplicity's sake, let's think of this in terms of the specificity, because if you're not talking about ADOS, you're not talking about reparations. You're basically talking about a class-based project, whether it be just for brown people, just for people from Africa, or some other category you want to use. Reparations is for the descendants of a chattel slave in America. But in addition, I think this is kind of the areas we have to like break apart, because people don't understand. And I'm talking about among the most knowledgeable, supposedly, people about slavery in America. They don't understand that slaves did not go back from America toward the Caribbean. They don't understand that they weren't seasoned in Jamaica then brought here. They don't understand all of the dynamics, so they create false narratives around nominal numbers of people that immigrated here. And we need to unpack that as part of this commission, as we plan to do as part of the California reparations bill that just came out. So let me talk about the other element. So you have the specificity, but the second element is the scale of wealth. One of the things I tried to do with my project initially was give people the scale, but I continuously ran up to what is the solution. Part of the reason I believe that happened is nobody was taught the scale. So they don't understand the scale only has one solution, that being reparations. This chart in front of you gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. So this chart shows wealth by white America has about 190 million people and 83 million homes. Black America has about 42 to 44 million. That includes non-ADOS people, and about 20 million homes. Understand, including looking at this as a chart, white America in 1989 had $24 trillion in household wealth. By the time we get to today, white America has over $100 trillion in household wealth. This is a result of policies both by Republicans and Democrats, whether we look at Reagan, who kicked it off, or we look at Clinton and Obama, who continued it all the way up to Trump. But the reality is white America today has $100 trillion. In 1980, I believe they had around $11 trillion in household wealth. By 89, they have $24 trillion. So now, as a result of how we tied up advantage inside of, I guess you could say, race through assets, they have $100 trillion. Part of this project is to have people understand you cannot work yourself out of a $100 trillion wealth gap. And I think that what we also have to get honest about is this dip. Part of this project is, why is that dip there? This is Obama's presidency, basically. Since Obama went, from Obama's presidency, white people gained about $30 trillion in household wealth due to how you approach housing versus forgiving the banks. But more importantly, inside of this, and there's a second chart I like to pull up, the Q1 Federal Reserve numbers give us even more nuanced visuals on this. This is the project, because if you don't know this, the answer is reparations, you can't get to the next thing that I'm gonna point out, which is the solution is to bring black wealth, ADOS black wealth, in line with white wealth, and I have a very specific number for that. Well, this Q1 Federal Reserve data gives us a breakdown of that $100 trillion that white folks have, that white America has. Part of what we saw is before 1990, and I get much of my information from talking to leading economists in this space, whether it be Thomas Shapiro, who wrote Black Wealth, White Wealth, and you can see the interview on my channel, who ultimately presents the reason we have this issue is because we didn't even present or give Black and white America wealth data until after the 90s. We just told everybody about income. Or whether it be Darity, who will be speaking to you later, or whether it be Byron Allen, among the wealthiest Black people possibly in the history of the nation, who also said that we're in the middle of economic genocide. What this shows is that genocide. So this is that 100 million broken down. The key number is the corporate equities and mutual funds, which when you have the additional documents is also inclusive of liquid cash. White America has $20 trillion in liquid wealth out of the 100. Black America, including Black immigrants, has $350 billion. That is an impossible task to use. That is such a low amount that it is almost being invisible in a nation that you built. That is the reparative justice problem. One part is just the overall scale. The next part is the liquid wealth. So when we start looking at this thing, we got to start unpacking the wealth side of this thing to be able to tell the story of what's going on, how we got here, and how we fix it. So if we think about it in terms of the $100 trillion, can you go back to the first image? Giving you some kind of scale. I just told you there are 83 million white homes and there are 20 million Black homes. That's a 1-to-4 ratio. If all Black Americans, all 42 million were counted, that means that Black America, instead of being at $3 to $4 trillion, should be at 25 trillion. But this is why specificity is important. 10 million of the 42 million do not come from American slavery. They're not owed a debt. And this is not about divisiveness. This is about truth. No more than we're owed a debt by CARICOM or any colonial gains that are benefited from if we were to fight back against colonialism. We're dealing with families that were harmed here in America for hundreds of years. They say in 1880, ADOS people were fifth generation. So what do you think it is now, 9th? And so I bring this up just to say the real number is probably around $17 trillion, that 34, 35 million, and that's where getting this going, we can get into specific numbers. 34, 35 million ADOS should be at more like $17 trillion with not 350 billion liquid, but 5 trillion liquid. That is the scale, and that is how college is so, it's not expensive if you have wealth. It's a reason that Yale to UCLA is $40,000 to $50,000. It's because of that $20 trillion in liquid wealth, along with the 80 trillion in other kinds of wealth. Can we go to the third image? I'm gonna try to run through this. I apologize if it's a little fast. This chart is just as important as the first two. Matt Brunig, one of the best charting people on the internet out of demos.org. We did a couple articles together. One of the findings that he's been able to show that no one else has really shown is Black wealth by decile. In America, white America has 90% or more of all of the household wealth. Black America has around 3% less than that, about 3%, 2.6. So what you see is that the bottom half of Black America, when combined, are worth negative wealth. Negative wealth. You might say, well, isn't white America worth negative wealth as well? No, they're splitting $100 trillion. So even if you get past the bottom half, they still have positive wealth, obscenely large amounts comparatively. So Well, then what else does this chart show? Well, the most important thing that it shows is that 2.6 to 3% is calcified within race in the top 10% of our families. So 75% of the small amount of Black wealth is held within the small share of Black boomers in the top 10% of our families, the top 2 million Black families. Largely their pension in their homes, that's why you don't see any liquid wealth. Black America is invisible when it comes to wealth in America. I don't think anyone has put it so bluntly to tell Black America, to tell Yale, to tell anyone else other than ADOS that Black America is invisible when it comes to wealth. There's no LeBron James or no Steph Curry that will fix that. What will fix that is a commission that makes it ever clear the consequence of that, not just in a pre-COVID America, but in a post-COVID America. So, you know, I look at this reality, and I have to get more specific. I have to tie the knot for everybody so that we can see what Yvette was talking about in specificity and what I'm talking about in data and how it reflects out. No report has done a better job of showing that than The Color of Wealth. For those people familiar, not familiar, The Color of Wealth has worked with Federal Reserve and several colleges, one of them UCLA, one of them Duke, showing cities across America, and for the first time, disaggregating Native Black families from what we see out of, I guess you could say, foreign Black families. What you see is they did Boston, and the middle Black family, the middle Native Black family is worth $8 liquid. They did Miami, and I'll come back to that in a second. The middle Native Black family was worth $11 liquid. Let's just say 0. They did Los Angeles, and the middle Native Black family, you can see it here, US Black, is worth $200 liquid. $200 liquid. So when we look, the metric we can use, the ruler is the middle white family. Middle white family is worth $350, this is Los Angeles, $355,000 hard, $110,000 liquid, regardless of education. But if this was just about brownness, as Yvette alluded to earlier, shouldn't we see the same with other groups that are brown? I'll start with the bottom, which is the Asian Indian. Just as brown as us, what you see is that they have more wealth than the white family, $460,000 hard, $245,000 of that being liquid. I'll move to the African Black, and this is where specificity plays a role, because this comes from the fact not just not coming from slavery, but not being binded to the bottom or bottom casted. Their middle family is worth $150,000 in LA, and worth 60 of it is liquid. And you can notice that 60,000 right next to the 200. No data set has ever shown this, so we can't even get into the discussion of the consequence of it. But part of, I think, what will come out of a Yale commission is similar to what I think will come out of the California study, which is fundamentally, if you don't disaggregate this, ADOS Black folks will collapse, not just economically, but socially, because they don't have the wealth to be here, but we're not confronting it because we have the faces to make it look like they have the wealth to be here. And so I come back to the end of what I'm saying about wealth, about the state of it. The end of, I guess, what me and Yvette are proposing about the solution, and say, can we pull up the last chart? That if you look at America by quadrants, we have to understand the scale of American slavery. And then the thing that followed, which was Jim Crow, and the extension of that, the vestiges in mass incarceration. So often we will forget it if we don't see it, that from 1600 to 1700 to 1800, there was slavery in America. Now, I understand America doesn't start until 1776, but its roots started before that. And so then we move into Jim Crow, and then we have mass incarceration. ADOS Black Americans have only been free for a very small amount of time. And in that time, we have been casted to the bottom through a secondary system of mass incarceration. What we need to do here with this commission is a recognition of the consequence and the cost of the slavery, of the Jim Crow on ADOS families. And I think ultimately that in and of itself will bring us to a reckoning about the need for reparations if we want ADOS to survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we are very honored to have with us California Assemblywoman Dr. Shirley Weber. Dr. Weber represents California's 79th Assembly District, which includes San Diego. Dr. Weber has been at the forefront of progressive legislation that is recently coming out of California, including Proposition 16, which is on the November ballot to restore affirmative action in California. She's also author of the first state-level Black American Reparations Commission bill signed into law in the US, California AB 3121. And she agreed to discuss this landmark legislation with us today. Dr. Weber?
Yes, thank you very much, and appreciative of ADOS and their and the work that they're doing to try to bring reparations to a broader group and a broader audience, and surely to bring it to the federal level. You know, the California Legislative Black Caucus, I chair the California Legislative Black Caucus. We have traditionally supported the House Bill 40 year after year in terms of resolutions and so forth and so on. And this year we decided that instead of just simply supporting the resolution, that we would basically author legislation that would put California in the forefront of dealing with the issues of reparation. We recognize that most folks' perception is that California was not a slave state. So how could this happen in California? And yet we know from the history of California that there were a number of governors, as well as there's legislation that we in the Capitol talk about that had an adverse effect upon Africans who lived in California before it was a state. Also, the fact that we participated in a number of fugitive slave pieces of legislation that returned people to slavery, allowed slavery to exist in the state itself. We allowed the slaves to be insured by the various insurance companies. And so California made quite a bit of money on slavery. And after the end of slavery, of course, engaged in a number of activities to try to push African Americans out of California, to do a host of things, as well as the impact of slavery with regards to redlining and segregation of schools, and you can go on and on and on. So despite the fact that California has the image of being a very progressive state, it has as ugly a history as most of the states in this union. And so, so with that in mind, we decided that we would obviously push this issue forward. Now, interesting enough, unlike so many other places, we didn't have the resistance. And keep in mind that this bill was not introduced as a result of the virus. It was not introduced as a result of Black Lives Matter taking to the streets. This bill was introduced at the beginning of session before all of that took place. The Black Caucus had decided last year that they would bring this reparations bill forward. We had already figured out our strategy for getting it in the House and out of the House. And so we ran across really no opposition to the bill itself because of the things that we had done in the House and in the Capitol, and because of the governor that we had who knew it was time to basically raise the issue. And just so happened all these other elements came into play with regards to what was happening nationally and the issue in pushing forward reparations. So, so we put the bill forward. And as a result, was able to get the bill not out of both houses, as well as signed by the governor and supported the governor in terms of getting this bill forward. It has been signed into law. Some of you attended the ceremony that took place. The governor sees this as a significant piece of his legacy with regards to making sure that the commission is formed, the commission will be is funded, and the activities of the commission will be shared across the state, as well as pieces and recommendation of legislation that will come forward. This is not necessarily a search to say, was there damage? It is to say there was damage, and how deep was the damage, and what is the consequences, and how do we begin to repair the damage that was done? So, so as a result, we are in the process now of forming the commission itself. It is a state commission, which means that it would get state funding for the activities that it's supposed to put forward. We have a very short timeline because we didn't want to spend most of our time, as some commissions do, organizing, and never get to the point of action. Plus, we know that the cycle, oftentimes of elected officials, is sometimes short. And we've had bills in the past that have been put forward, and then the people who put them forward are no longer in the assembly, so the reports come back and they sit on somebody's desk and nothing happens. And so there have been 2 reparation bills in the past, and one dealing with, I think the research was done out of Berkeley and I think Santa Barbara. The report, we see bits and pieces of the report. We're still looking for the report because the people who asked for it were no longer in the assembly. Then we have another bill that was Hayden's bill that basically deal, I think, with insurance at that time. And so we've had our insurance commissioners to provide information, but nothing has happened with regards to that. So, so we are optimistic that many of us who put the bill forward will still be in the legislature in the next 2 to 3 years, and we can actually look at the impact of all of the legislation and the activities that occurred at the Capitol and occurred in California, and begin to talk about what do we need to do to bridge the wealth gap, the education gap, the justice gap that exists in California. We've done some things earlier, obviously, in terms of legislation with regards to the justice gap, in terms of changing laws, and we've reduced our prison population by 50%. We were 180,000, the largest prison system in the world. Those of us who've been working on it now for the last 3 or 4 years are now we're at 90,000. So, so we've been doing some work to try to bridge that gap. And so we know that the wealth gap, the home ownership gap, all those kinds of things are before us. And so we'll be working to figure out how we need to do that. The commission is 9 individuals who will be formed, and each, I can't remember exactly, the governor I know has 5 appointments, and the speaker pro tem has 2, and the speaker of the House has 2. And so there are 9 members of the commission. The Black Caucus will be consulted as we form the commission with the governor, and legislators will be on the commission. So we will also choose, I think, 2 to 3 legislators who will serve on the commission as part of the 9. So that, I mean, it's a fairly simple bill, but obviously getting a lot of attention and a lot of interest, and we're eager to figure out who will chair the commission. Those kinds of things will be done by the commission itself once it's formed. The commission has to be formed before June of next year, by June of next year. And that will be important. The budget for the commission would be included in the governor's budget that's coming out in January. We're fortunate particularly in the assembly, of the 5 persons who serve as sub-chairs of the budget, 3 of them African Americans. So we're glad about that. In the Senate, the chair of the Senate budget is an African American. So we have some people in place to make sure that this bill is protected in some way in terms of funding and programs that come out of it. So that's where we are. You know, like I said, we are right now in the process, because of the elections, everything is stopped, obviously, because of the 3 weeks left before election. So we haven't done much on the bill other than getting it signed and all the things that are there. We will probably, once the election ends in November 3rd or 4th, we'll be actively working to form the commission. We've had a number of people who've sent in applications who want to be included. We'll look at those to see if they're the right kind of fit with regards to people who can do the research, who can handle the information, those kinds of things. And there will be public hearings of the commission with regards to its findings and its recommendations as it is formed and as it reports out to the public. There are a lot of discussions and pieces of how the commission will interface with our with the work that we're doing with the Bunch Center, and we have a new president at the University of California, so we'll be approaching him about the role of UCLA, the UC campuses, in the research that's to be done. We hope that he will see this as an opportunity to put this in his flagships and see the new president, and he's the first African-American president at the University of California. So we're excited about that in terms of that possibility. We also have not only the Bunch Center, but we have the Merv Dimely Center that the caucus supports at Dominguez Hill. So we hope to be able to wrap those 2 research institutes that we've worked with for the last 5 or 6 years and supported at the state level. The Black Caucus has to be able to utilize their work in assisting the commission and the research that it needs done and the analysis that needs to be done and the recommendations that will come forward. So we hope to have the first recommendations from the commission in 2022, I believe it is, that will come forward. We hope to have those recommendations in 2022, knowing that there will probably be others that come forward, and we'll see how that goes. We have not prescribed any nor any limitations on what the commission could come up with. And we have not said it has to be only economic or it has to only be financial or whatever it is as people would like for it to be. We think that given the depth of what has happened over the last 400 years to Africans in this country, that it has to be more than just a couple of dollars. You know, that in itself does not get to, as pointed out by some of those who went earlier, that it doesn't get to the economic, it doesn't get to the emotional, it doesn't get to the psychological damage done. It doesn't get to those issues that are core and critical to it. We think it is that we have to do something that has a profound impact upon the life of Africans in California. And we'll have a tremendous challenge in definition and trying to define exactly who does it really relate to, as so many Californians are new to California in the last 100 years or 50 to 100 years. And yet the impact that it has had on their lives, and then the impact that it had on California in terms of the limitations that were there, we'll be looking at all of those kinds of things. So that's where we are in terms of the formation of the commission. We're excited about what we hope to find and the results that we think are possible. California is with all of its challenges, is a very wealthy state. You know, it's the 5th largest economy in the world. And so it has a potential to do some things that many states don't have the ability to do, but even do some things that the federal government sometimes is unwilling to do in this arena. So that's where we are. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Weber.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Next, we have Friday Jones, co-chair for the American Descendants of Slavery LA chapter and co-host of the weekly Reparations Forum, Politics in Black, who will also introduce us to Dr. Kevin Cosby, president of Simmons College of Kentucky, the nation's 107th historically Black college and Kentucky's oldest and only private HBCU. Simmons College of Kentucky has offered to form a joint reparations commission between our two institutions. Ms. Jones?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Chris, thank you so much for allowing us the space to be here. I am Friday Jones from ADOS Los Angeles. I co-chair with Lori Jenkins and with Tiffany,
Coral.
Thank you, Tiffany Corals. There are 3 of us to sort of make this vehicle move in the way that we have been moving. We came together in April of 2019, and then we formalized in October of 2019, and we have been moving forward. The idea of having a joint reparations commission with involvement from ADOS Los Angeles, Simmons College of Kentucky, and Yale University, we think is a goal that we should be trying to reach. Second slide. ADOS Los Angeles basically functions as an intergovernmental advocate for ADOS in the Los Angeles area. We have met with our federal legislators, Karen Bass, Senator Harris, Senator Feinstein, and we have also met with the communications director of the Congressional Black Caucus. At the state level, we have worked with Dr. Shirley Weber on a couple of initiatives, and we have also consulted with Holly Mitchell. And in Los Angeles, we've met with Mayor Garcetti, as well as all of the African-American commissioners across the city of LA. We've been very, very instrumental in COVID recovery specifically. We took an intergovernmental approach with regards to COVID, and in general, that is how we approach the Black agenda as it relates to ADOS Angelenos. Our legislative focus obviously is reparations is number 1. Proposition 16, we will be helping to push through this election coming, next month, November. We are seeking a federal ADOS designation. We have pushed that at the state and city level. It has been well received at the city level. It is a process as far as the state, because the state tends to follow the federal. So that's why we use the intergovernmental approach. And then ADOS contracting is also a big push for us. Third slide. Okay, so ADOS Los Angeles really wants to just have the ability to ensure that there's ADOS representation at the table. We want to curate ADOS policy experts for this joint commission. Simmons College of Kentucky obviously is an HBCU, it's a liberal arts college, and Yale is an Ivy League research university. Simmons College was founded in 1879 by the Convention of Colored Baptist Churches in Kentucky to train Negroes one generation removed from slavery. And then we have Yale, named after Elihu Yale, a merchant slave trader who was president of the East India Company. Yale inherited a small slave plantation that it used to fund its first graduate programs and scholarships. So bringing together two institutions that have rich American history, we think would be helpful in widening this Overton moment that we are currently living in. Next slide. Dr. Sandy Darity presented to the judiciary June 19, 2019, and he had essentially 6 HR 40 reparations changes that he wanted implemented into that particular legislation. And we hope that with this commission, we could actually breathe life into these changes with the interdepartmental approach. One, we want to really beef up the experts. The current language reads that all Americans of the commission shall be, all members of the commission shall be persons who were qualified to serve by virtue of their education, activism, experience, particularly in the field of African American studies or reparations justice. That language was written in about 5 years ago from NCOBRA. NCOBRA has pretty much self-identified as individuals who have been in the reparations space for over 30 years, thus making them qualified to be commissioners, whether at the federal level or at various state levels. For that reason, we really want to expand our commissioners broader and beef it up for folks that have American history backgrounds, constitutional law, economics, stratification economics, political science, sociology, health disparities, wealth inequity, inequity in education, criminal justice, mass incarceration, media, housing. Those areas we think will really work well with the interdepartmental approach and with the joint effort between the two colleges. Paid staff should be the goal, not paid commissioners. There is language in HR 40 for G18 pay scale, which was at the time it was written the highest pay scale. Currently G15 is the highest, but it's almost $250,000 salary that was written in again by NCOBRA. And our feeling is that there should be an honorarium. You should have reimbursements for childcare, travel, expenses with a stipend or an honorarium, but not G6 and G16, G15 and G18 level of compensation. 3, we want to look at the eligibility criteria. Again, specificity is what Antonio and Yvette have talked about as it relates to American descendants of slavery, chattel slavery in the United States. And we want to make sure that we keep it specific to those affected by the laws of this particular country. 4, as Antonio said, the purpose of reparations should be specifically to close the wealth gap, because the wealth that was created had a window of time in this country. And the goal has to be for African Americans, for ADOS, to actually repair that wealth gap. 5, the timeline, as Antonio also said, the United States was founded in 1776. And so as it relates to holding this country, this nation accountable, it has to fall in line with the founding of the country itself. 6, there is no defined timeline in the language of HR 40. And so much like we did with the California AB 3121, we want to put a clock on it, and the clock is 18 months. Next slide. The goal is to have this Joint Reparations Commission, again, to widen the Overton window. We are currently in what the Greeks might call a Kairos moment. This is the perfect time to have such a commission to come out. It could be a precursor to HR 40. Knowing that we have California doing research, California's AB 31 allows them to research other states in the union beyond California. Where Yale is concerned, Yale has the economics school, their statistics, computer sciences, technology has to be part of the reparations because that's the new wealth factor. Their political science, government, American studies, history, we have the medical school with biology, cognitive sciences to talk about what might need to be done on a social level to make this Overton window work. We also have the African American studies, German Jewish studies, music and film tying us back into media. And then with Simmons College, we have the religious studies and sociology. We know for African Americans, a lot of our politics come out of the church. And we also have the business management school and the international communications. And again, a tie-in with music and media. So that is all I have for you. My last slide is just a thank you so much. And I'm going to pass the mic on to Dr. Kevin Cosby, president of Simmons College of Kentucky. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Friday, and thank you so much for allowing me to engage in this discussion as the president of Simmons College of Kentucky. The opening statement by Tom Steyer, I think, sets the tone for what I want to say, and that is, in his opening statement, he said, and I quote, "Start with leadership from those communities." And I think that speaks volumes about his heart and his wisdom. And I think it says something very special about Yale, that you recognize the possibilities and the importance of engaging a Black institution and having a Black institution at the table with the discussion on reparations. The fact of the matter is, always those who are closest to the problem are always those who are closest to the solution. Simmons College of Kentucky was an institution that was founded by enslaved people in 1879. We are a 141-year institution. And institutionally speaking, we have been at the forefront of the discussion on reparations. There is no HBCU in the United States that has made reparations and the pursuit of reparations for the American descendants of slavery their primary mission, like Simmons College of Kentucky. We started something 5 years ago, called the Angela Project, and that was designed to educate the nation on the issue of slavery. And the Angela Project was named after that woman who history says was the first woman to come off that Dutch man-of-war ship in August of 1619. And we started the Angela Project in 2015 in anticipation of the 400th anniversary of Black enslavement in this country, to educate. And we have been quite successful in doing that. We have been able to mobilize 3 conventions, in fact, multiple faith conventions, thousands and thousands of people to get them involved in the push towards reparations. One of the conventions that we've mobilized is the Progressive National Baptist Convention, which is the convention that was founded by Martin Luther King Jr. for the purpose of civil rights and social justice in 1961. So it is my hope that, Stokely Carmichael defined a Black institution as simply this, and that is Black people coming together to take care of Black people's business. And Simmons College is an institution that is committed to Black people's business. The dilemma I have found is that the number one problem with the Black community is that the Black community doesn't know what the number one problem is. The number one problem with the Black community is the absence of wealth. And my acrostic for justice is J, Jim Crow, U, urban renewal, S, slavery, T, terrorism, which is lynchings, I, incarceration, C, cops and courts, and E, economic exclusion. And I hope, and I think it's very important, I think, that Yale be in partnership with a Black institution that has demonstrated its commitment to reparations, because one of the things that we do want to avoid is the white savior industrial complex, in which Black people are depending upon traditional historical white institutions to be at the forefront of something that is really a Black issue. I'm glad that Yale is going to bring all that Yale can bring, but I do hope that Simmons College is invited as the preeminent HBCU college dedicated to reparations, that Simmons College would be at the table. And as the president of the school, I would welcome the opportunity to collaborate with Yale University towards really making a difference and finally bringing justice, reparation justice to the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cosby. Finally, I reached out to Dr. Ibrahim Kendi, Director of Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research, who regrets being unable to attend, but extends his support for this important work. He has an article urging all of us that there is no middle ground, no benign neglect on reparations. And as Tom Steyer shared, we all have a part to play in making federal reparations, and particularly a comprehensive plan for restorative justice for Black Americans a reality, hence the importance of a Yale Interdisciplinary Reparations Commission. So now I would like to open the call for open discussion and Q&A. Everyone should now be able to unmute. Again, we're hoping that faculty will take a leading role in making this commission a reality.
This is open questions?
Yes, this is open question form. If anyone has questions, you are able to unmute yourself at this time.
Okay. Well, I would just say, I guess, since there's this blank space here, that American Descent Slavery, ADOS, what we would hope is to take a leading role in helping craft how this looks, because we've been on the ground. We have hundreds of thousands of ADOS people that have been ignited to learning not only about their lineage, but also about the economic realities of their communities. One of the things that we saw is that with HR 40, after Obama, there were nearly no co-sponsors. As a result of myself and Yvette shows, across this nation, we ignited those 150 sponsors by sending ADOS people out to their offices, to their meetings. That can be shown on video. Just recently, the Wall Street Journal actually shows it in charting how the spike happens after ADOS starts challenging politics in a way that we haven't seen really since civil rights. One of the things that we don't want to do is politicize this, but at the same time, this is politics. We had a great meeting with Karen Bass about reparations, and one of the things that came out of that meeting that was supposed to be an hour, it ended up being 2 because it was so good, is reparations will not be won in courts, and it won't be won just by law. It will be won by people. And that people power will come out of ADOS. There's never been a group that disaggregated the damaged group so we can actually create the fuel for that damaged group to demand what they're owed. And if you don't have that group demanding what they're owed, all of it just becomes a study. So it's all feeding off of each other. And our goal is to to not only assist, but play a leading role in trying to craft this. That's part of the reason that I brought Simmons College to the table. That's one of the reasons I specifically asked the wonderful Assemblywoman Weber to be on this call, or for ADOS LA to have her on this call, because I want to bring the best experts into this space so that we can possibly actually attain reparations.
Anyone else? All right, I guess you can take it away, Chris. Final statements. You're muted if you're talking. I assume that's okay. So there's a question in the chat from Jane. Not sure if she wants to ask that or she's unable to unmute. But the question is, I assume that support for ADOS would not exclude other ideas for social justice reforms, such as Cory Booker's baby bonds, ?
Well, let me say this. I myself did a report with the individuals that created the baby bond, which is Darity and Hamilton, called what doesn't close the racial wealth gap, the mythology. So there is this circle, but I will say this, that we have an agenda on ADOS101.com. Our agenda is independent of reparations, but reparations is our mission. So they aren't, it doesn't exclude those things, but I think at the same time, the critical analysis that ultimately will come out of studying reparations is the gravity of the damage. I don't think everybody understands neither the scale that I showed earlier with wealth, nor the gravity of how focused it is on specific families that bore a specific cost here. But they aren't, both things can coexist. It's just a question of how, and that comes after we do more study.
And it's also a question of when, right? So what we're also talking about is urgency. Like what group has the most urgent need right now? And when you look at that data, what you find is that the most urgent need is ADOS. What you find is the group with the lowest level of wealth is ADOS. So, it's almost like a hospital analogy. Are you going to treat the gunshot victim, first, or are you going to treat the person with stage 1 cancer? Okay, we have to treat that person, but this person is going to bleed out. And when you see the studies about, going to zero wealth, and I think 2053, when you see those studies, you realize that, this is about survival for us, not just about a better quality of life. This is how we survive. And I think that has to be the cornerstone of how we address this. This is an extremely urgent need for us. So nobody is saying that there aren't other things, but what we do understand in a racialized America where lineage is key, we have to understand that for ADOS, class doesn't fix race. So we have to have the invention of race needs a very specific race-specific remedy, right? And so that is reparations. And then everything else comes behind that or co-partners with that. But reparations has to be in there. And we should not confuse ourselves and make ourselves believe that class fixes race, because it doesn't.
And let me add one last thing to that, because one thing that is interesting about the question, and I think because we haven't talked about reparations, we as a nation, not a specific people even, don't see that social justice reforms gets away from the reality that reparations is a debt. Many of these other things are just an altruistic kind of gift. So are we going to give baby bonds, because it basically gives bonds to as babies are born based on their wealth level, before we give reparations to grown people? Another question that brings that up is about student loan debt, right? So you forgive the student debt, right? But you don't deal with the fact that ADOS only went to college at a 16% rate. White America went to college at a 30% rate. Even newer Africans went to college, 35% rate. BAs, I'm talking about bachelor degrees. Newer Africans, I think we're at 27%. What you actually then end up with is it all comes down to budgets. If you put a budget there, this will ultimately lead to a giant wealth transfer to white Americans while you avoid reparations. All of these are discussions that come out, I think, inside of something like what you guys are proposing, but we start to get honest in a way where we start moving past what's a debt versus what is just a social program. In addition, if these social programs are instituted, can we still do reparations, and how do they impact reparations? All these are questions that need to be unpacked.
Anyone else?
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank and applaud Chris Fields for pulling this together and pushing this conversation. I'm learning about these issues myself in recent years. I'm learning a lot from Chris, and so I want to call him out and acknowledge him for spurring this conversation.
Thank you. Are you there, Chris? I don't know where you went.
Excellent. So this recording will be shared with all the faculty who have been invited. And again, we're hoping that faculty here in collaboration with Simmons College will make this commission a reality. As Ibram Kendi stated in his article, there is no middle ground, there's no benign neglect. Lack of concern or attention to this issue is fundamentally racist, and Black Americans deserve restorative justice. So it's incumbent upon us as a leading institution to take charge of this issue.
There is a link to the article in the chat.
All right, so if that is it, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on today's call, and have a great evening.
We will email a link, I believe, to all the participants, if you would care to review and share. Is it shareable or is it private once we?
It will be shareable.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ending for everyone? Chris?
Yeah, we can go ahead and end.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, let me cancel that.